Welcome to the social medium. We are all here to entertain. A mix of improv, music, comedy, entertainment for your brain. Oh, yeah, we're here to entertain you. Maybe make fun of your mom.
My name's Ryan Hill. I'm Programming Director at the Arts Quest Center at Steel Stacks here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. My job specifically has me focusing on cinema and comedy. Comedy's always been my passion. I started a stand-up showcase in 2008 called Tickle Me Tuesdays at the Allentown Brewworks. And I also was the Managing Director of Associated Mess Improv Comedy Troupe starting in 2009. And those things have helped build me to where I am right now, and helped get some stuff going on in the comedy scene.
Hi, my name is Jason Brown. I've been performing stand-up comedy for the past 9 years. I released my comedy album, Jokes to the Bathroom Door, this year. And I'm in my car getting a car wash.
Hi, I'm Glenn Tickle. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I've been performing in Lehigh Valley since 2009. As a stand-up, I host Nerd Night Bethlehem, which is a monthly show at Steel Stacks. I used to host a talk show at Steel Stacks. Ryan Hill told me that I've performed stand-up comedy at Steel Stacks more than any other comedian when I asked him to say something nice about me, which isn't necessarily like a nice thing, it's just a fun statistic. And this is my dog Elvis, who won't go away from us.
Hi, I'm Richie Warmkessel. I'm a stand-up comedian, improviser, and actor from the Lehigh Valley. I've been doing stand-up here in Bethlehem and Allentown for close to 10 years. I started out doing a lot of open mics, and luckily I've been getting booked on shows more and more regularly here. I've performed in New York with my improv teams, as well as a handful of festivals locally, doing various different things. I do a lot of musical theater as well, and I'm just happy to be performing all the time.
The first place in Lehigh Valley I did comedy was Bethlehem Brewworks. I went to the open mic, which at the time was called Tickle Me Tryouts, was the Sunday night open mic. I went there to see a friend who was trying comedy for the first time. He was very nervous and wanted me to get on, and I told him, well, no, because I did this once before, it went bad. But the reason I went to go see him is because I was thinking about doing it, so I wanted to see what it would be like before I committed to doing it. So I told him it was every other week at that point. So I'm like, well, I'll come back in 2 weeks if you come back and do it again. Because he kind of super bombed that night. So much so that 9 years later, we all regularly reference how bad he did that night.
That went great. Just like a lot of stand-up, that first time, it went great. My second time at the Tally Ho, the night before Labor Day, that was terrible. That was the worst.
As far as doing improv, I was a theater student in college, so I took classes in improv, and we kind of started a small group and did shows at different art galleries. And then stand-up was an accident, almost like everyone's story. I had a friend who did stand-up at the Bethlehem Brewworks, and his girlfriend bailed on him one night, so I went with. And, there was a slot open for 5 minutes, so I did it, and then just kind of never looked back. I remember doing... Every Sunday I would try and write a new 5 minutes, and if anyone who does comedy knows that's a daunting task at first, but it's the best way to get started, and then eventually you just grow from there and figure out a way to either make it a career or a hobby, or you just give up because it's terrifying.
I got my start actually in magic in 1989, and I always incorporated comedy into my magic. Some of my magic idols were like Harry Anderson and Penn and Teller, who are kind of like stand-up comedians that perform magic. So it was always there. And then I saw an advertisement for an open mic, comedy only. And I was like, I can be funny for 5 minutes. And I did. I went and I did it. And I kept going back and going back until I phased magic entirely out of my act and now I only do comedy.
This area, anybody who's been in this area for longer than maybe 15 years is very aware of the transformation that's happened in this area since basically the final death knell of the Bethlehem Steel, which was mid 90s, even though most people would point to like the early 80s as like when it was really kind of on a respirator, I guess is what you would say. So anytime a area goes through that sort of thing, it loses kind of its identity and kind of switches to a different one to a certain extent. It's got to be able to kind of laugh at itself. It's got to be able to take what is really kind of it was a daunting thing. It's so funny to me that I even work here at the Arts Quest Center in South Bethlehem, because I can remember, when I was growing up in Jim Thorpe, and like as a older teenager, if I would go out, my parents would say, "Don't let me find out that you ended up in South Bethlehem. Like, do not end up in South Bethlehem." Even like up in Jim Thorpe, there was enough of an awareness that this was a bad area to be in. So, and I could say this kind of for the arts in general, because I'm proud of of our organization's role in what we've been able to do to make the Lehigh Valley a really viable place to live for a lot of people. And comedy's got to be part of that, and I think it could be a bigger role, and that's what I'm trying to work for right now.
The Valley's very welcoming to comedy. A lot of the local restaurant owners are fans of comedy.
I think comedy is huge in the Lehigh Valley. It's hard to explain. I think it's such a big thing for arts organizations to recognize that it's one of the mainstays of the entertainment world. Comedy's been around for ages. The ancient Greeks wrote comedic plays, and it's been around forever. And I think it's a great way for people to express a lot of the hardships and a lot of the hard things in the world. With the political climate we're in, and kind of the economic state of the country, and especially this region, being that there were a lot of industries that were booming here 30 or 40 years ago that have now completely fizzled out. For instance, we perform here at the Steel Stacks every week, and it's an old steel plant that shut down, and now it's an arts facility. I think that it's a beautiful thing in the way that we took something that was old and rusted and kind of put a beautiful face on it, and allow people a place to go to escape, the tough times that we're in. Especially, like I said, there's people like my uncle and my dad who lost their jobs due to layoffs and downsizing, and it continues to happen. But having a venue where you can come and laugh and have a beer and forget about what's going on, and especially laugh at someone else's pain on stage, it's really freeing for you personally, which I think is the overall thing. Comedy is important for people because no one has it easy. The people who have it easy in life, the people who have wealth or the happiness, they don't really need to find an outlet. For those of us who maybe have not had it so easy, or who continue to struggle, this is a great place to come and forget about your world for a few minutes, and get to know each other. Especially with stand-up comedy, it's so raw, and it's someone else putting their life on stage for you. You get to know them in an intimate way that some people who work with them in their office, or some people in their own family, might not know, because they're willing to be open and be real with the audience.
Comedy impacts the Lehigh Valley because it makes me genuinely want to stay in it. I live outside of Phillipsburg, and I know it's contentious as to whether or not that qualifies as the Lehigh Valley. I think it doesn't, because that's not how there's a body of water in between. That's not how valleys work. But I like that the Lehigh Valley is close. That's where I started doing comedy. There's enough going on that I feel like it's worth staying in. It makes it a more interesting place. If you look at some of the best comedy clubs around the country, they're not in a terrible, boring suburb somewhere. Like, they're in cool and interesting places. And that's not a mistake. It's because comedy makes you cool and interesting. So there's a great John Waters quote that you might have to cut out of this, but it's, if you go home with somebody and they don't have any books in their apartment, don't fuck them. If you go to a town and they don't have a good comedy club, don't fuck anybody there. Don't do any sex with anyone, and use protection when you do at good nights or whatever.
I produced several open mics. I eventually took over the Tickle Me tryouts it's been handed down from host to host to host, and I produced that for a while. I tried producing a few others. One of those ones that I produced, somebody drove a truck through the wall of the restaurant, so that kind of put a damper on that one. I kind of have one going now that I produce, sort of, kind of. I started it, I handed it off to someone, and it's still going. So that's kind of my attachment to that one. But I don't know, maybe like 6 different open mics in the area I've started. Different restaurants, bars, venues.
What moved me into starting Tickle Me Tuesdays was the simple fact that there just wasn't, the open mics that I'd be doing around here were mainly music open mics. So I'd go on in between people doing like acoustic covers of Allman Brothers songs. And, there'd be a lot of people in the audience who that's what they were there for. They were not there for jokes. And they especially weren't there for jokes by somebody who was as green as I was. But at the same time, I really appreciate that time, because it's trying to win over a crowd that's not there for jokes is definitely an interesting way to build up your ability. And then too, I would be traveling into New York or Philly just to do comedy open mics, and again, not a lot of money, so not a lot of gas money. And at the time, I was waiting tables at the Brewworks. They were opening up this place in Allentown. They just needed content. I pitched them on this. I gave them like a 6-page presentation as to what the show would be, and they were pretty impressed, at least by that, and it went from there.
I mean, I love the fact that we have venues like this where we can try stuff out that may not be great material. You're kind of free to do whatever you want. There's a lot of people like Ryan Hill and Dan Marr who've allowed us to try out some really stupid comedy in like a non-judgment zone. That toilet flushed. That'll be good for comedy.
Most of my friends are local stand-up comedians. They're improvisational actors. They are people in the industry, and I enjoy their company. I like when they make me laugh. I like when I make them laugh. I respect them and their opinions, and that, like, those friendships and those bonds are like the best thing I've gotten out of the local comedy scene.
I enjoy that I have friends, because back to the earlier question, being a very indoorsy kid, I like doing stuff by myself. I don't generally like other people or spending time with them. So if you do comedy shows, you keep running into the same people. You end up with friends not necessarily on purpose. If you keep seeing Andy Malfarina at the same open mic week in and week out, he kind of grows on you, and then he's your friend. And if you're socially awkward or you don't like making friends or meeting people, even just not necessarily performing, like, there's regular audience members at local shows that I'm friends with now, just because, I don't know, I see Leanne all the time.
One of the things I love right now, and it's kind of hard to say that this is part of the community, but I have this intro to stand-up class that I teach right now. I'm teaching one, and it's full. It's got 16 people, and it's got it's got a bunch of people from all different areas of life. It includes like 5 cancer survivors, somebody who just survived a motorcycle accident that nearly took his life, and seeing these people realize what they can uncover about themselves via comedy is always a beautiful thing. I absolutely, there's a lot of people who groan or roll their eyes when they talk about like a stand-up class, because they think everybody's probably garbage, and that's just not the case. It's a lot of people just kind of finding out that their life is funny, that there's not, they don't have to make these big high concept things. They can just take these parts of their life and realize how to harness that into comedy, and that I love. And I just, the Lehigh Valley comedy scene in general, is a scene with a lot of very supportive people in it that want to see other people do very well. Every scene has its ebbs and flows, has its ups and its downs, and every scene has its situations where there's people who get in there and they're not in there for reasons that are very supportive to a scene in general, because there's always a balance. What's really good for a scene might not be great for like one individual, and that's okay. Like sometimes that happens. Obviously, with the way I have to do things at Arts Quest, I have to be considering, how the organization, so I've got to balance like the needs of the organization, patrons, and performers. That's like my main job. The three things that I juggle are the needs of those, and the best shows find good spots for all three of those. I very much enjoy how much imagination has been being pumped into some shows and some ideas, that it's not just necessarily just always traditional stand-up or just traditional improv, that there's a lot of, especially when I go to the Brawl, I just see a lot of different things start to happen, or different ideas come through, and I really just like seeing people being brave with their imagination on stage. That's probably my favorite thing.
I think what I like the most is that there is a community. There's people like Ryan, who I've known since I started, who have been doing comedy, and I've watched his career grow into more of an administrative role, which is amazing because it allows him to book people like me who might not necessarily have a chance otherwise. We're in a really unique location between Philly and New York, where you can travel to New York and do shows, but it's a grind and they're terrible. You can go to Philly, where there's a lot of great things happening. But as you see the scene grow here, you realize that there's a community of artists, not just comedians, but performers of all kinds, people who consider themselves comedians but have many talents. Like Glenn Tickle, I hate to admit, plays the violin pretty well for an idiot who bought a violin off the internet. But it's kind of an incubator here, and because we have a community of supportive people, we're able to do things together and collaborate and really grow as a group. So it becomes a lot less about you as an individual, but as to how we can make the scene grow and make people come here and watch us.
I feel like what I do is fairly frivolous. Like the thought of maybe it helps somebody get through the day is nice. I don't know if that's true, but like that's what I tell myself when I realize that most of my job isn't like contributing to anybody other than myself. Like my whole job is standing in one spot talking about myself for an hour, which I love to do, and it's why I agreed to do this. But I feel like, there's other jobs where I could have been a firefighter, my brother's a firefighter, or a police officer, something where you're more directly helping people. But I think, I don't know, when you're sad, if you sit there and listen to a comedy album for an hour, like you're a little less sad for an hour, and that's not bad.
I know it's my fault. I'm the one to blame. She left me alone, and I'll never be the same. Oh yeah, I know.